Hello everyone, welcome back. So, we're finally experiencing the first rerun of Clorinde, and so naturally everyone is asking once again, should you get her? And to that I say, oh hell yeah. Here's the thing. Most of us are probably gunning for Mavuika this patch, and some of us may want to go for Xilonen as well, which means for a lot of us the primo funds are going to be pretty dry at the end of all of that. Or maybe for some of us, we just simply aren't willing to spend that much money on the game that quickly. I get it. Considering there's also an Arlecchino rerun happening as well, we're kind of in a bit of a pickle, aren't we? So, I guess the real answer I'm going to give you is this. If you are in a position where you know you can afford Clorinde, I highly recommend Clorinde. Okay? And if you're in a position where you're tossing up between Arlecchino and Clorinde, I'd recommend Arlecchino if you don't already have an on-field pyro character that you enjoy playing. For example, Mavuika, Diluc, Yanfei, Gaming. Otherwise, I still highly recommend Clorinde over Arlecchino as well. Now you may be wondering, hold up, why do you have such a high opinion of Clorinde? You don't even have her in your top 20 strongest characters list, so what's the dealio there? The answer is quite simple. Clorinde is still the most fun character to play in the game. Straight up. And at the end of the day, well, at least I, play games to enjoy myself and have fun. Which might be a foreign concept to some people watching this video. So, yeah, and she claps the Abyss tree boss as well, so double yay. Thus, Clorinde is, by my estimation, the best character in the game for such a purpose. And I will explain why. But first, don't forget to subscribe, okay? Of course, I'm going to be doing a Should You Get Arlecchino video as well, and a lot of Mavuika videos as well, so don't forget to hit that bell so you get notified and keep up with the latest videos on the channel. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it.
Let my name echo in song.
Tell me what you see.
Fate is upon you. Let me see. Time to testify.
So, generally speaking, there are two ways to play Clorinde. She has two particular playstyles. One is the Meta playstyle, and the other one is the Fun playstyle. Now, the Meta playstyle involves strictly adhering to doing N3Es during the full duration of her skill, which is how you activate her gun, right? And this is because of how her Bond of Life mechanics work. So while your Bond of Life is below half bar, which is by definition 100% of her HP, it is built by firing your gun, which does more damage and it has punch through. So we do like that. You then spend your Bond of Life by lunging, and you heal when you do your lunge as well. And if you happen to lunge after your Bond of Life surpasses that half bar, then your lunge suddenly does more damage and it also does more hits. So that's really, really good. So that's why N3E is how you normally build up more than 100% of your HP as Bond of Life, i.e. half bar, and then you spend it with that E, right? You can also maximize the healing from your lunge based on the Bond of Life used at the time through this particular rotation. So during your skill duration, outside healing will also build up your Bond of Life. And you should also note that if you play on particularly high ping, I have heard that that could potentially screw up your N3E just damage overall. So I think people on high ping, they might end up playing N4E just to be absolutely sure. So of course that describes the meta way, where you just play N3E 24/7. Then there's the fun way, which is exactly how I play. See, I'm a Warframe veteran, and Clorinde is now one of 4 characters in the game who uses a gun on the regular, right? The others, of course, being Navia, Chevy, and Chaska. So as long as her Bond of Life is low, her gun does more damage and has punch through, right? So that's why I actually lunge a lot. Some people call that E-spamming. That's exactly what I do. Because I'm not using her lunge for damage. Oh no. Because I'm not building my Bond of Life higher than that half bar for the most part, right? Instead, I use her lunge, which doesn't really have a cooldown, for mobility. That's the idea. And that is what makes Clorinde the most fun character to play in the game. Number 1, gun. And number 2, insane mobility, arguably the most mobility in the game. So I'm zooming around all over the place, shooting fools left, right, and center. Of course, that being said though, before I start zooming all over the place, I still need to do N3E at least twice because of her A4 passive. And then otherwise, look, sometimes I screw up and I get hit and I need healing. So when I need proper healing, I'll N3E again. But otherwise, look, if I really need the damage as well, because let's say it's the last few seconds of Spiral Abyss and I've really been screwing up, then yeah, okay, fine, I'll N3E as well. Otherwise, most of the time, I'll be zipping around all over the place, having a grand old time doing maximum gun damage. Then we also have Clorinde's ult. I personally barely use it, but that doesn't mean it's completely useless. In fact, it can do a pretty decent amount of damage. And on top of that, it's extra electro damage and electro application, which can be very useful if you're using, let's say, Thundering Fury, which in my opinion is Clorinde's best in slot artifact set. I'll go into more detail about that a little bit later, but simply put, under the right conditions, you can essentially shoot enemies with your entire skill duration, use your ult, and the electro reactions that come from even your ult will then help in resetting your skill cooldown so that you can just start shooting all over again, which is really, really cool. On top of that, sometimes you can end fights with your ult, which is hella cinematic, so we do like that. There is no other character that plays as dynamically as Clorinde. Not even Mavuika, not even not even Arlecchino. Clorinde has the coolest kit in the entire game, and it's not even close.
Order guide you. Stabilize.
Grow! Midnight Phantasmical
Loaded. Hunt them down. Into the shadows.
Share my knowledge!
Solidify. I will have order.
By royal decree!
Ready. What evil looks. Shoot on sight.
Wings of darkness!
Gather.
Into the shadows.
Order guide you. Solidify.
Mystery trailer! Odds revealed!
Time to testify.
Since Clorinde's release, there have been quite a few new characters that are interesting to play with her, so let's go through them. The first one is going to be Sigvin. So Sigvin is supposed to be a good healer for Farida teams, which Clorinde can be part of, so if you already have Sigvin, then great, you're good to go. We also have Emily, who can be a fine alternative to Nahida, especially in multi-wave shenanigans. This is, of course, not going to be a team comp where Emily particularly shines in, but for that multi-wave shenanigans, yeah, you could probably use Emily instead. Kachina can, of course, hold the scroll set as a way of buffing Clorinde, depending on the kind of team that you're playing. Then, of course, came Xilonen. And I did an entire video about the effect of Xilonen in various aggravate teams, so feel free to check that out. Suffice to say, Xilonen is phenomenal in a variety of Clorinde team variants, not just the aggravate type. So if you don't have her, when the Xilonen rerun comes around, I highly recommend getting her, not just for Clorinde, but for pretty much everyone on your account. And then finally we have Aurodon, who could also use the scroll set, whilst also having some pretty interesting mechanics if you happen to play some form of an electrocharge team, like a taser team, with Clorinde. And because he also drains Night Soul, I suspect it may be possible to run an Overweight Mavuika team with two on-fielders to tag in and out with each other. I don't know, maybe. Of course, speaking of Mavuika, here's the deal. As of writing this video, I don't actually have any first-hand experience with Clorinde and Mavuika, but I have heard that there are suggestions out there that Clorinde can generate about 28 Fighting Spirit per rotation, which could imply that Clorinde and Mavuika together, just just those two characters and then two other random not Latland characters could at least maybe pop Mavuika's ult regularly, but you probably won't be getting full value out of Mavuika's ult. So that previously mentioned overvape team with Autoron, I don't know, maybe that might be really good. All of this to say, Clorinde was already in a pretty good spot when she first released, but now she's in an even more phenomenal position with all of the team options that she has. I also want to reiterate a point that I mentioned in the Raiden Shogun rerun video when comparing the Almighty Narukami Ogosho God of Thunder with Clorinde. See, A's teams are a lot easier to play because she can battery everyone's ult, making characters like Farina, Shangling, and let's say C0 Baiju a lot smoother to run. And apparently, the Raiden Shogun can potentially do a bit more damage than Clorinde. It's a little bit of a toss-up from what I've heard. But Clorinde is still more fun to play than A. So I guess at the end of the day, between these two characters, you should really ask yourself, which is more important? The Booba sword or the gun?
Not too far now. Go! You're free now!
Decided by destiny. Let me scroll.
Into the shadows. Hunt them down.
Speaking of teams, I want to highlight some of my favorite comps and some of my favorite teammates for Clorinde. So when it comes to those teams, I tend to play Clorinde in either Quicken, Quick Bloom, Chaos, or Overvape teams. And in Quicken and Quick Bloom teams, well, these tend to be her meta comps and they definitely make TF smoother to play. Whereas Chaos and Overvape comps can be quite fun sometimes, especially if you just want to have a lot more elements available if you want to, I don't know, beat the ass of Baptiste, for example. There's also, of course, Overload Clorinde. I'm not a fan of it myself. It is good because Chevy is busted, but I'm just not a fan of it because it doesn't really work that well with TF, at least in my experience anyway. I can't quite seem to maintain an underlying pyro aura for the most part, so I end up having to deal with gigantic skill downtime, which is not really something that I personally enjoy. Right? When it comes to Clorinde's teammates, well, here's the deal. Pretty much any off-fielder in the game is going to be pretty good with Clorinde, especially the ones that don't have massive ER requirements. So, for example, C1 Xilonen, C1 Baiju, Nahida, if you want to play in non-multi-wave content, C4 Kirara, maybe Farina if you're not terribly worried about her ult, Toma the Higher, Mavuika, you know, suddenly all of these immediately spring to mind. Clorinde's best buffing teammate is going to be Sara, and it's not even close. See, if you have C6 Sara, well, then the crit damage buff is super duper useful for Clorinde, as well as TF Clorinde players being able to basically easily weave in Sara's buffs for all uses of Clorinde's skill. Essentially, the skill lasts for 7 seconds, and then after you finish blasting, you just swap over to Sara, get her buff out again, and then you start blasting again, because Sara's buff lasts for 6 seconds. So yeah, there's a tiny bit of downtime, but it's not a big deal. And then Clorinde as well has an A1 passive where getting more attack is really, really good, because she just basically double dips on all of that attack. So that's really, really strong, right? Should also mention as well, other Electro characters are really good with Clorinde. Miko, Fischl, very useful characters indeed. Now, there's also a handful of healers that are also particularly amazing for Clorinde. For example, Mika, who of course has an attack speed buff as part of his skill, which is actually really, really useful for Clorinde, as her gun damage doesn't have any hit lag. So when you can attack 20% faster, then you're basically shooting 20% faster. So you're effectively doing 20% more gun damage. It's not exact, but it's close, right? Besides, who doesn't want to fire their gun faster? You know, fire rate is a pretty useful thing in Warframe. So there we go. I also want to mention Medic Mona. So here's the thing about Bond of Life healing. Healing bonus is actually super duper strong for characters like Clorinde and Arlecchino because of how Bond of Life healing math works. Say, for example, Clorinde has managed to reach the half bar of Bond of Life. When her lunge actually does the healing, it will heal for 110% of that Bond of Life. Remember, half a bar of Bond of Life is 100% of her HP in Bond of Life. So you effectively heal 110% of her HP, which first clears that 100% of her Bond of Life, but then it also heals Clorinde for the remaining 10% of her HP. Now, what happens when you use Medic Mona's skill or ult as part of the Maiden's Beloved bonus? well, you end up giving the entire team a 35% healing bonus, effectively. So in that same scenario, instead of healing for 110% of her Bond of Life, you actually heal for 1.35 times that, which is actually 148.5% of her Bond of Life, which once again clears that Bond of Life, but then you get to heal Clorinde for the remaining 48.5% of her HP. Let me say that again. 48.5% of her HP. The difference in actual real healing isn't just some 35% of the original anymore. It's nearly a 5 times multiplier, which is huge. And Clorinde just gets to do that with every big lunge. So that's huge right there. This is something that you can experience in Farina teams as well when you're under Farina's ult, and that's before we start commenting on the whole damage percent and team healing that Medic Mona has. So yeah, really, really solid indeed. And finally, of course, we also have Xilonen for obvious reasons. Like I said, she does a lot, but also she's a big healer, and also she's a very fast healer, so it's worth noting that Xilonen's insanely fast healing kind of means you get to lunge more often and still get the full heals or the full lunge damage, so you get to play the fun mode even more. At the end of the day, it's not just the meta characters that make Clorinde particularly good. There are plenty of not so meta characters in the game that still make her extremely powerful. So if you get Clorinde, I wouldn't worry too hard about trying to set up a team for her with like the best characters, because you do end up having quite a lot of options to play with.
Shoot on sight. Apologies. Storm the front. Quiver. Loaded. Letting brave names echo.
This may turn a little.
Strike. Please hold for just a moment. Bring it. Fire in consideration.
A minute to memory.
Flash. No turning back. Ready. Apologies. What must go on?
Grow. Make yourselves at home.
Loaded. Sheer anarchy. Time to testify.
Building Clorinde is actually kind of hilarious because we need to remind ourselves of her A4 passive. So Clorinde's A4 passive is basically all but guaranteeing that she gets 20 crit rate for free. And that's on top of the crit rate that she gets from her Ascension and potentially any more from her weapon choice. Essentially, after you're level 90 your Clorinde, you're basically aiming to make your build reach up to only 80 crit rate, and then you want to stop right there. So there we go. Because of that, weapons like Absolution, being her signature weapon, is of course going to be her best in slot. Not only do you get extra crit damage as part of her substat and her passive for some reason, but on top of that there's a Bond of Life mechanic as part of the sword. There are no other sword characters that can really use Bond of Life that well, so it's going to just be her for the time being. But other crit damage swords are still pretty good for her as well, like Miss Splitter, which I believe Roffler uses for their Clorinde. However, surprisingly enough, according to various calcs, apparently Haran Geppaku Futsu is apparently her second best weapon, and that's the weapon that I'm using on Clorinde. Surprising because it's a crit rate weapon, so you have to be careful with how much crit rate you're getting in your artifact pieces if you're using Haran Geppaku Futsu. Because at level 90 you already have 24 crit rate, then your passive is an additional 20% crit rate, then there's also 44 so that's already 44 crit rate, and then of course Haran Geppaku Futsu is another like 30 odd crit rate, so you're already at 74 crit rate, which means you only need 26 crit rate in your pieces before you start overcapping. So no crit rate hat for you. 4-star weapons also have some options. Now apparently if you're a battle pass player, you're really only stuck with the black sword, because Wolffang doesn't buff normal attacks, so not exactly the best idea to use Wolffang. The new Urshu event sword from the Masters of Nightwind event is also pretty good for Clorinde who are playing with, let's say, Zhongli, Kirara. Otherwise, I still think the general free-to-play option is going to be Finale of the Deep for the most part. It is, of course, the Fontaine Craftable. The Natlan Craftable Sword is just not for Clorinde, so don't even worry about that. Meanwhile, when it comes to artifact sets, there are 4 kinds of setups that you can choose from. So the first one is going to be Whimsy, which is her general best in slot just for pure damage per rotation. We also have the Gladiator set, which is the more accessible for the time being because it's strong boxable but overall weaker alternative. We also have 2-piece Attack Electro, and then we also have Thundering Fury. Now, I am a huge advocate for Thundering Fury above all else. Yes, I have tried Whimsy Clorinde, but the 8.5 second downtime in her skill is enough for me to just not care about Whimsy Clorinde at all. There are some teams, like Overload, where that 8.5 second downtime is kind of unavoidable even with TF, so at that point you are better off with Whimsy because you're just going to do more damage. But where most teams you can make full use of TF, she's just really good with TF. Now, Akasha leaderboard calcs are a bit funny when it comes to this kind of stuff because with regards to TF builds, the Akasha system has decided to use skill burst skill as the full rotation calc as opposed to other artifact sets which just use burst skill as the rotation. So at that point, we kind of end up with similar damage when you go skill burst skill with TF versus just burst skill with other artifact sets. So at least you have an idea as to like how much less damage you would do if you just did burst skill with TF and then just moved on. That's what makes TF so great because you can actually do skill burst skill, right? So once again, it is a meta versus fun decision. TF is fun, Whimsy is meta. Either way, I personally continue to have zero intention of swapping out from TF in any meaningful capacity, especially because I somehow have rank number 6, the world's number 6 TF Haran Geppaku Futsu build right now, and I'm very healthily trying to farm just one extra stat to get the number 1 build. For artifact stats, Attack Electro is pretty much the way to go, and then you need to figure out whether you want to use a crit rate hat or a crit damage hat, depending on what weapon you're using. Just keep an eye out on how much crit rate you already have in your build, right? Also, don't be scared to use artifacts that accidentally roll oops all attack, because they can be very strong. Case in point, I have a crit damage hat that just went oops all attack. It's really good. If you're into Quicken and Quick Bloom teams as well, don't forget that Oops All EM is actually fine as well, because EM is welcome in those teams. And also, let's go through Clorinde's Constellations, because once again, like a lot of good 5-star characters, you don't need any of her Constellations, but look, I'd be shocked if you can even afford Clorinde's Constellations after all of the characters that are coming in 5.3, but either way, we'll go through them as well. C1 is extra electro attacks. It's a bit of a buff for Quicken teams. C2 is a bigger A1 passive and some interruption resistance, which can be nice. I mean, you could just play Clorinde with C1 Xilonen, C4 Kirara, the higher, Zhongli, you'll be fine anyway. C3 is skill levels, C5 is ult levels. This is important though, because the gun and lunge damage is all tied to your skill talent level scaling as opposed to your normal talent level scaling. And that is the case for, I think, every character that has this kinds of attack, except for like Xilonen at the present moment. So, yeah. At the present moment, like, skill and ult levels for these kinds of characters is really important. C4 is more ult damage based on Bond of Life used, and C6 is hilarious. Apparently, if you pair a C6 Clorinde with, let's say, a Xingqiu who uses his skill, suddenly you're basically invulnerable. You can take the hardest hitting nuke damage and you actually will parry it, reflected back as electro damage, and you won't die. There are videos of C6 Clorinde that exist all over YouTube. They're pretty funny to watch. I have been kicking ass the fun way with C0 Clorinde, so I feel like at no point in time should you ever feel obligated to go for any of her constellations. there we go. The most fun character in the game is back for a rerun. I cannot recommend her enough because she really is the most fun character to play in the game. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. Can you afford her after all of this? Or do you already have her because you made the correct choice when she first came out and actually got her? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Buckle up! Shoot! Bomb! Ready.
Shouldn't get careless.
Let's get it on! Say cheese! Hunt them down! Let the world collide! Look alive! Breaking news! Smile! Into the shadows! Buckle up! Loaded!
Let's end this quickly!
Strike a pose! Hold that pose! Let's get it on! Time to shine!
Let's end this quickly!
They're still losing! Buckle up! Into the shadows. Where evil lurks, shoot on sight. Smile! Look alive! Brilliance! Lightning, echoing song! Shoot! Bomb! Hold that pose! Into the shadows.